Well, I'm here with the legendary, world-renowned storm chaser, Mr. Mike Bettis, and you've got quite the life story. I know a lot of the viewers will definitely be quite familiar with a lot of what you've been through over the years. So I'll start by asking, you still do quite a bit of chasing these days, right?
Well, I kind of retired from tornado
Oh
chasing,
wow.
and I still do just about everything else, right? You'll still find me out there in hurricanes, snowstorms. Snowstorms are probably my favorite, honestly. They're a little bit more fun than everything else. Um, so yeah, I still have my feet firmly on the ground, but in other storms these days.
Okay. Is there a specific reason why the change?
Oh, well, probably a variety of reasons. After the incident that happened in El Reno when our team was actually hit by a tornado, and then there was like some reflection with my wife who's like, "Are you sure this is really what you need to be doing?" And at the same time, it kind of almost at the same time, technology just became so much better around that time. 5G networks were coming out, 4G networks were really good, 5G networks starting to come out, and storm chasing was becoming so popular, right? And so, for the Weather Channel in particular, it contracting with other storm chasers give us just a wider net to cover, right? Because a tornado's in a single spot, and we were just a single team, and and being in at the right spot all the time, is not the easiest thing to do. And so casting a wide net of chasers out there was a little bit more advantageous for us because our ultimate goal was to put tornadoes on television, and so that gave us a better opportunity to do that. And generally, as a whole, the Weather Channel has backed away from going and covering tornadoes live. At least we'll do aftermath still, of course, but we generally now leave it up to all of our contracted chasers to go ahead and do that for us for
Okay.
tornadoes at least.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. So one of the things you mentioned that I did want to ask about that's not Joplin related was the that infamous El Reno situation. That was, I mean, that's that whole tornado is obviously infamous, notorious. People have studied it continuously and will for probably probably millenniums. They'll be talking about El Reno. But yeah, I wanted to ask, do you remember the specifics, and you can share whatever you're comfortable with, but the specifics of what it was like in the actual moment that the tornado started to lift the vehicle? Because people that don't know, he was chasing the El Reno tornado. He could explain it better than me, and they got caught on the very outer edge. That was a wild tornado that caught people by surprise, but and it lifted the vehicle, a very intense, I could imagine, overwhelming situation. But do you remember, what was what that was like, what that was going through your head?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I've told the story a few times, but it was a very surreal experience, to be honest with you. We were coming north. We were chasing that storm, and we had come from the north and had come down into El Reno, south of I-40, and we could see the tornado. It was that a mile away from us, maybe. Big, giant wedge tornado. And we stopped to broadcast. So we were traveling in a caravan of three. So we had a lead vehicle, which had an engineer in it, and then my vehicle, which was myself, camera person, and a producer, and then the vehicle behind us, which was our broadcast vehicle, which was a satellite truck, which had two engineers in it. And basically, my vehicle had cameras mounted in it, and it was wireless to the satellite truck, and so we could broadcast while on the move, which gave us a real advantage, right? Again, now with cell phone technology being so good, it's not necessary. It's not necessary anymore, but and our camera person, his camera would also be connected wirelessly. So we could just literally hop out and start broadcasting, or we could broadcast from the passenger seat, whatever we wanted, right? It was all hooked up. It was pretty cool. So anyway, we pull over, we see the tornado, we hop out, and we start going live on the Weather Channel. They had been covering it. Dr. Forbes, Chris Warren were in the studio, and they had been covering it on the radar. And then we pop up, we do a quick broadcast, and I probably did like a minute. It was really short. And my whole goal was, and it always kind of was this way, we always wanted to be on the south side of the tornado. Because generally speaking, tornadoes are going to move, east or northeast. And so if you're on the south side, you're going to generally be in the safer spot. We were on the north side, which we didn't really want to be. And on top of that, our satellite truck, um, it would it needed a view of the southern sky because that's where the satellite was. And so my goal was always to be on the south side of the storm because otherwise the satellite wouldn't be able to shoot and penetrate through a supercell, right? It's just too much gunk that was getting in the way between the satellite and the dish. So anyway, we broadcast for a brief minute, and then I was like, "Let's go south as fast as we can and get on the south side of this, so that we're out of the way of this thing, and we can broadcast." Well, in that time that we then ended our broadcast and we're heading south, the tornado expands. It grows about twice in size, takes a turn off to north, accelerates. And so it kind of everything that could have gone wrong went wrong for us. And as we were going south, we end up getting struck by, um, in essence, I could see multiple, suction vortices within the parent circulation. And, there was a moment where I saw our lead vehicle who had our engineer KP in it. The vehicle went off to there were two lanes going south and we were in the left hand lane. And I remember he the vehicle goes over into the right hand lane. I was like, seems really weird to me because the tornado's off to our right. Why is he changing lanes and getting in the right hand lane? And then he keeps going into the ditch. And I realized at that point his vehicle, big Suburban, was being pulled into the tornado. And I was like, oh no, this is bad
Man.
news. And at that moment, I could see these vortices spinning just to our right. And I just remember saying to everyone, get down, get down. I think we're going to get hit. And just at that moment, everyone got down. We just felt a big hit, like a big thud. And then we go airborne. And there's there's this weightlessness, right? And for me at that moment, time stopped. Literally, time stood still. Hold on, brothers. Hold on. Everybody duck, go, go, go. Just keep going if you can. Keep going if you can. Everybody duck down. Everybody duck down. It was just seconds, but to me, it was like a lifetime. Everything happened in slow motion. Um, and I remember just thinking, actually, at that moment, thought I had died. I thought I had this weightlessness sensation, right? And I thought I was ascending to heaven. I was like, oh, this is what it's like. And it was just kind of peaceful. My eyes were closed. And I remember seeing this vision of my wife's face in that moment. And I was like, I died. I'm off to heaven. But at the same time, I'm having a secondary thought. That's that kind of out of body experience. And I'm having a second thought. It's simultaneously. It's like, oh my gosh, we're way up in the tornado. We've been hit by a tornado and we've been sucked up way high in the tornado because I don't feel anything, right? I feel weightlessness. And so this logical side of me is trying to determine in my head what's going on. You just can't see anything. It's just clouds all around you. And I was like, and then at that realization, to me, I'm like, we're hundreds of feet in the air or something. I had no idea. I couldn't comprehend because you can't see anything. You have no idea where you are. And I thought, oh my gosh, when this vehicle comes out of this tornado, that's the moment I'm going to die because we must be hundreds of feet in the air and the impact with the ground is going to kill us all. So then there's this thud, right? And we hit the ground. I remember distinctly. The vehicle is rolling side over side. And at that moment, I realized, I snapped kind of back into reality, if you will. And I realized that I'm alive and we are I feel the whole sensation. I feel it all. I feel my head hit the side airbag. It's very jarring. It's very violent. We're tumbling over and over and over again. And we finally come to a stop. and we're wheels down, we're right side up. Um, and it took me a second. I'm like, and I opened my eyes. I was like, holy moly, what just happened? Like, I'm alive. And then I was talking to Austin. Austin, you okay? Brad was in the back seat. Are you guys okay? And they all were like, yeah, I'm okay. I'm like, they were all conscious at least. I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. But all the windows were gone and we were still in the tornado. We just weren't being tossed by it anymore. And so I just asked everyone to still stay down, because the winds were violent still within the vehicle. We just weren't moving. And after, a minute or so, the tornado had moved off, the winds had died down, and um, just kind of took me a second to realize what was going on, and the car was all mangled, and so we had to like get out of the windows. Part of the roof was smashed down, but we all walked away from it, and it was a pretty crazy moment. For myself and for Brad, our cameraman, it was kind of some scratches, some bumps and bruises, and Austin, who was driving, was more seriously injured. He had some more serious injuries that needed attention, and that was a really wild moment, like the craziest like moment of my life, honestly. And there was a it probably took me a while to come to grips with what had happened. Right, there was probably for I almost guarantee you I had like some PTSD after that. But I've told this story before, Daniel, is that for me, I didn't actually, when full PTSD set in for me, it happened 5 years later, when I actually did, believe it or not,
Wow.
a podcast with Dr. Marshall Shepard on the 5 year anniversary of El Reno. And for whatever reason, recalling that moment triggered something in me and brought back that traumatic moment for me. And there was a solid like year that I had some really, really bad PTSD that went undiagnosed for a while. Like literally, like I just thought, like at any moment in time, and it's just called all of a sudden just hit me. Like I just constantly thought every single day I was going to die, something was going to kill me. And finally, after many months of struggling with this, I finally got a diagnosis of PTSD and ended up finally getting some treatment. But it took me almost a year to finally feel better from from the symptoms of PTSD. And so that's kind of how long that journey of El Reno lasted me.
Yeah.
It lasted a good long while for me.
Wow. That's one of the most incredible stories. I would imagine that would change some things, the way you look at your life. I've got a wife and kids, and even just like watching and listening to that story and watching videos about it is, it hits you on a really deep level. It actually, even just watching it can impact you and make you, it can affect your perspective and how you look at your entire life. So it's amazing.
Yeah, you don't, you try not to take anything for granted, anymore, right? And I think
Mhm.
that, what you've been referring to is the crazy moment was Brad, our cameraman, had been shooting out the window right as we were driving, and he set his camera down, and he took cover, but the camera was still recording. The camera literally flew out the window, landed in
Mhm.
a field, and actually perfectly framed our vehicle tumbling through the field. So it's like a 1 in a million shot, right? You
Yeah.
actually see our vehicle
Yeah.
tumbling through the field. KP, who was our engineer in the first vehicle, he ended up being fine. Um, but he said that he looked out his window and he thinks our vehicle was probably about 30 feet in the air, got tossed about 100 plus yards over the highway and into a field, and then we tumbled for probably another like I think we got thrown for about 140 yards and then tumbled for about 60 yards or so. And so it was a wild ride. But yeah, that moment tells you like don't take anything for granted, right? At the time, I had not even been married a year yet, and I had thought to myself afterwards like maybe I'm doing this wrong, right? Like I could have made my wife a widow at a very young age, and maybe I should be a little bit more responsible, or I should be, I should think a little bit more about her than myself. So that's kind of how I look at it now too.
Yeah. Well, it was kind of an anomaly of a tornado. I'm sure you're well aware of that, but
Hmm.
yeah, incredible that nobody had very serious injuries, right?
Well, Austin was hurt. He had some vertebrae in his back
Oh,
that
wow. Okay.
he, and so it took him a while to recover. He is fully recovered and still in the business. But yeah, listen, we were having, and when you think about it, being hit by a tornado and being tossed basically 200 yards in a tornado and walking away, all of us, were able to walk away from that. That's pretty remarkable. I feel very blessed.
Yeah, yeah. So let's get into the Joplin story a bit. Do you remember, when that day started and at what point, did you think that this was anything more than just an ordinary severe risk type of day? Because it wasn't, historic risk going into the day, but it
Mm.
was kind of, from what I've seen, it was pretty standard, like what was it, a moderate risk or enhanced risk maybe? But do you remember leading up to before the tornado?
Yeah, I remember the whole thing, right? You're right. There was nothing particularly special about the day, but we had started the day in Kansas City. We were going to go south. Joplin was going to be our location the whole time. That was our target the whole time, or somewhere around Joplin. And that afternoon, we ended up over in like Columbus, Kansas, which is like just over the state line from Joplin, pretty close. And we had popped on a storm, late afternoon, and the storm wasn't much. It literally like came right over top of us. We did a little broadcast real quick, nothing special. Watching the storm, we'll keep you updated, and then we were just gonna follow in behind it, right? So we get back in the vehicles after our broadcast. We're following behind the storm watching on radar. The storm's growing, it's getting bigger. And then the sky just turns black, right? And we're getting hailed on really bad. So we end up slowing down. Um, and I always credit the hail for probably saving our lives because if it hadn't been for the hail that was dumping on us, we probably would have been right in Joplin when it hit. We ended up being behind the storm just a touch, just to stay out of the hail core, and then came in right in behind the storm as it hit Joplin. So it was, it was a storm that at first glance, when we got on it, it was just forming, and then we all, of course, know what happened after that.
Okay. So did you ever have a visual of the tornado?
Never.
Oh wow.
Never saw
Okay.
it.
Yeah, I didn't remember seeing we've everyone has seen the footage of you in Joplin, but I didn't recall seeing you before the
Mm-mm.
damage. So can you walk us through what happened whenever you first started to get to the damage?
Yeah, it kind of, to me it happens in steps, right? We were right there, after it happened. We had come in, we had our scanners on and stuff. You heard a little bit of traffic on the scanners about tornado damage, and we were kind of right on the edge of where the damage was, and there were some trees down, and we were like, oh, we're probably gonna need to broadcast, here. And I remember we're just like a residential neighborhood. We're going real slow. And a guy comes running out of his house. Doesn't have a shirt on, and he just looks like kind of crazed. And he just kind of runs across the street. And we're like, that was really weird. But he just ran out of tornado. And I think he would just had kind of just lost his senses, right? And then we had gone a little bit farther down the street, and we come upon this fire station that partially had collapsed. And there's a vehicle that's got bricks on it. It's a brick building, and the fire trucks have bricks on them, and they're going to be inoperable. Firefighters are like pulling bricks out. What we didn't know at the time, I was like, "This is our story right here." Like, my gosh, this fire station has been struck, and we're going to broadcast from right here. Little did we know at the time there was the vehicle that was in the parking get in because of the storm. Well, the firefighters never heard them because they were taking shelter like in the back of the firehouse. So they didn't even know the people were there. And so as soon as the place got hit, then they were trying to pull all these bricks from the buildings off of their car to get them out of the vehicle. I didn't know that until after the fact. But they all ended up being okay. But we ended up broadcasting, Daniel, then just walking down the street because then I just remember this moment walking past the firehouse and then it just kind of all opened up where the hospital was. And then you'd look out over, it was a very densely populated neighborhoods. and it was all just mowed down, right? And it just kind of opened up, and I was like, oh my gosh, like this is this is really, really bad. And we were there literally just minutes after it happened. So it was all very, very fresh. And, the hours after that were just chaos.
Yeah. Yeah, I imagine that that must have maybe been the first moment that you realized this was something a lot more a lot bigger and bigger scale than what you anticipated. Um,
Yeah, I mean, I've been to numerous tornadoes. After the fact, generally is how we would always cover them. Or some where there were just tornadoes out in the field and it was like no big deal, right? Like small tornadoes. But this was a whole different scale, right? And mind you, this is just coming a month after the super outbreak had happened the month before, right? We saw that, footage nonstop. Um, but this was, you can having done it, for a few years, like I could just tell this one was right up there, right? And um, probably what most people are familiar with is, there's a moment in the broadcast we're broadcasting, and I had seen so many things at that point. Like I had seen dead bodies on the sidewalk. I'd seen this poor young girl who had broken bones being pulled out of her home, put on the back of a pickup truck, like rudimentary stuff, like breaking your heart kind of stuff. Animals that were wounded with broken bones, and people walking around with wounds. And it's just like truly like war zone kind of stuff that I don't think I was prepared for. But there's a moment in the broadcast where I kind of break down. I was just like it just got to me, right? And really, what that moment is in that moment, I recall my coworker Paul Goodlow had been in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, the month before. Okay, and it was quite bad, right? That was an EF4 tornado, and a few dozen people had died in that tornado. And when I looked out over the landscape that now had been destroyed, while I was broadcasting, like this moment of realization hit me. And I knew in my heart of hearts, like, this is way worse than Tuscaloosa. Like, I can't say that on television, but I know this is way worse than Tuscaloosa. And so it kind of hit me like many, many people have died here. More than a couple of dozen people have died here. And it just kind of, it just struck me at that moment. It just kind of made me cry. And I was like it just overwhelmed
wow.
me. And so, that was just a moment that happened. And, at the time I was a little bit embarrassed that it happened because, you really want to try to keep your composure and report the facts and what have you. But I think that after the fact, a lot of people had said to me, like, that just made it real for them. Like, having that moment happen on live TV with someone who's generally composed, like, that struck a chord with them. And so that kind of, um, it made me realize it was okay. It was okay to be a real human in that moment.
Yeah, it's a very tragic scene this evening in Joplin, Missouri. Just tornado devastation as far as the eye can see, and off in the distance there, beyond the firefighters there, they're doing search and rescue right now. We even have fires that are erupting in Joplin. It really is an unfolding scene, changes minute by minute. Neighbors are trying to they just pulled out their dog, right? That is great. They just pulled the dog. He looks to be okay out of the house there. That's great news. But it's just everyone is just stunned right now. They're going house to house trying to find people that may still be trapped in debris. It's overwhelming for the firefighters. It's really it chokes you up when you see what's happened here, Paul. I mean, all I can say is it looks very reminiscent of what we saw last month in, excuse me, in Tuscaloosa.
Mike, are you all right?
This has got to take your breath away, buddy.
It's tough. No question about that.
That's, I think, for me and for a lot of people, that moment, and amidst the entire Joplin disaster, that moment really kind of breaks the fourth wall in some way. It brings it to life, and yeah, I mean, it can make you emotional just watching that moment because people know that, you generally do your best as a journalist to, keep it business, strictly business or whatever. But I can't imagine. You mentioned there was, more than just a dozen fatalities and that you recognize that at that point, let me ask you why do you think it was such a, Hackleburg happened a month before in the super outbreak, and there was, I believe it was 71 fatalities, and that's the second most lethal in the modern era. And Joplin was more than double that. So why do you think that was? Is there a variety of reasons?
Sure. The intensity of the tornado is one of them, but I think where it hit, right? It hit in very compact neighborhoods on a Sunday evening. A lot of people are home, struck a hospital, but also struck stuff like big box stores where, you had a lot of people that might have been shopping. So you had a lot of people in vulnerable, positions, right? And the homes in Joplin, these are older homes, and some of them have basements, some of them didn't, but all kind of generally smaller homes, not big mansions or anything. A lot of wood frame homes, wood siding on them, and they're all close together, right? Like small yards. You could almost reach out and touch your neighbor's house, kind of thing, right? And so having that densely populated area be hit, residential areas be hit, I think was really one of the driving forces behind that, right? And I kind of almost in some, I kind of almost in some regards think it might have been a blessing though that it happened on a Sunday because it hit numerous schools. And I thought to myself, if this happened on a school day, when you've got thousands of kids at school, they would have been sitting ducks. So maybe being home, in some regards, saved some people. Having said that, again, yes, it was the deadliest tornado that we had seen in 75 years. And I think for a lot of people we never really, I guess for some of us, me myself included, thought something like this we haven't really seen before. We had seen Oklahoma City tornado before, or Hackleburg, or the super outbreak, but not kind of the amount of damage that you saw with this because it just hit everything. And it ended up being the single most expensive tornado in history, right? I think that the estimates are like $3 billion for a single tornado, which is an insane number.
Yeah, it's amazing. I've watched and read a lot of stuff on Joplin, and then preparing to do the video was rewatching a lot of stuff even. And I think even tornado nerds, they don't, you can kind of forget just how insanely bad this one was. I've watched and, stuff about every tornado, and it's just incredible, the scale of the damage and the human toll, and just the effect on people, the stories and everything is, it's kind of mind blowing, just
Yeah.
the amount of them.
Well, and the thing that really was so bad about that tornado was the hospital was right there on the edge of these, neighborhoods. And so that's where everyone would have gone, to be treated. And the hospital was hit, right? And so the hospital was inoperable. And so you basically had doctors and nurses doing triage in the parking lot. People would literally just walk to the hospital to try to get treatment, and they just were doing everything they could to treat people literally in the parking lot with anything they could. Mostly it was just like rubbing alcohol, stitches, and gauze. And that's how they were treating people, right? Or maybe they could get somebody in an air cast, or I mean, they didn't have everything they needed to treat people. And then the other hospital becomes overwhelmed. And so you're trying to get these people to a variety of places. And many of these people are very seriously injured. So that's one of the things that I remember quite a bit is just like of all the things to hit, it hit the hospital, and that was tough. And there were patients inside the hospital that ended up dying.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure that there's, you know, s- some things that you saw that, you know, people just, you don't really just talk about it openly. I've heard that from a lot of people, just, but what moment or few moments really stand out in your mind when you look back on that day?
I think what stands out to me about that day was just everyone was in shock, right? Like even myself as a broadcaster, like I was in shock. But you meet people, or you have a passing moment. And there are probably two moments that really stand out to me. Um, One was a gentleman that had come up to me and said, "Hey, like, I need a doctor. Like, I need some treatment. Where can I go?" And I was like, "Are you okay? Is everything all right?" And he just picks up his hand like this, and it's got a massive gash. And I was like, I was like, "Oh
Mm.
God!" I felt so helpless at that moment because I didn't have anything. Like, I could offer the guy a bottle of water, and that was it. I was woefully ill prepared, for this moment. I think we might have had a tiny like first aid kit in one of our vehicles, but it had like, band-aids in it, and stuff like that. And all I could say to him was, go right there. Like, go to the parking lot right there. There are doctors and nurses right there. Are you okay? And he just like, okay. Like he was in a state of shock, right? And so he just walked to the hospital and I never knew his name. I didn't know what happened to him, but just kind of hoped that, he ended up being okay. And I met another man there as well, and he was just so panicked um, that he was looking for his neighbor, and he just was searching everywhere for his neighbor. He could not find his neighbor. His neighbor was an older gentleman, and he was very worried about him. He hadn't seen him. He was trying to search through his stuff, couldn't find him. The guy was panicked. No cell phone service, nothing. And so, we're trying to help him, but listen, there's so much debris everywhere. Like the guy's home is collapsed, and like we have no idea, what the status of this gentleman is. But I just remember the panic in his voice, in his look about his neighbor. He was just worse to death about this guy, right? And even the next day, couldn't find him. They had search dogs there, and they had gone over his property numerous times, and could find nothing. And then I think it was 3 days later, he'd finally gotten a call from him. The day before, he'd gone to Florida to visit his daughter. So
Wow.
it was like,
Wow.
oh,
Yeah.
thank God, right? But there was that moment of relief. But there, you go from that moment of sheer panic to that moment of relief, and these the roller coaster of emotions that you go through, and certainly people that live there, we're living it every single day.
Yeah. Yeah, I mentioned something like that in a recent video, how the juxtaposition of, some of the absolute worst possible moments you could ever go through, followed by the relief of seeing your family or whatever it is.
Right.
I think that's part of what makes these experiences and stories so, endlessly fascinating. I wanted to ask, you returned to Joplin maybe more than a couple times, I'm not sure, but just talk about the recovery and the community of Joplin. And
Well, recovery is a slow thing when you have a really major disaster that happens. And so it comes in stages, right? And, for the people that live there, it can never come fast enough, because each day that they have to live through it is just another day they have to remember it, right? Even each day their home is not rebuilt is just them reliving the moment of it. In their lives, Joplin is a marker in their life, right? Their life is marked by pre-Joplin and then post-Joplin. And that's how their life is categorized. But I think that when you have something like that happens, it can become very galvanizing for a community. It's their identity, and they know that. They know that when most people hear about Joplin, Missouri, probably the first thing that comes to their mind is tornado. And they know that, but it doesn't. I mean, in some sense, it defines Joplin, but it doesn't, right?
mm,
It's much more than that. And I think they certainly had this amazing sense of community afterwards. And I remember being there the 1 year anniversary, and they had this like Memorial 5K run, and like there was a lot more joy, of course, and more celebration about the recovery of Joplin and the resilience. And you see this in a lot of places that have to go through a disaster. But I think when you have one that is so sudden, right? Hurricanes to me are different than something like a tornado, because with hurricanes you at least have the ability to know it's coming, right? And maybe you can react to that. With a tornado, your timeline is much smaller, right? And you may not have that time, and it can rearrange your whole life in seconds, literally. And I think just that suddenness of it all is a bonding mechanism for the people that go through disasters like Joplin.
yeah, yeah, it's incredible. again, truly can't thank you enough. It means a lot to me to be able to hear your stories and talk to you about this. And I know it will for the viewers too. So thank you. To end it, what would you want people to take away from this video and just the story of Joplin?
Well, I would say, listen, a couple of things. Weather disasters can happen everywhere, whether it's a Joplin or it's something else. It's a snowstorm, it's a wildfire, it's a hurricane, right? Preparedness, I've learned it can go a long way and serve you quite well, right? But just always being weather savvy. Those of us that talk and eat and breathe weather, it's second nature for us, but it's not that way for everybody, right? So having a little bit of knowledge, and then also realizing that you're probably a lot stronger than you think you are. Yeah, if you go through a disaster, and you're probably not alone, right? There are a lot of people out there that can offer you support, and you can do, disasters can force you to do things you never thought possible. And so give yourself some credit, when it comes to major weather events. You can do it.